Thanks. Mm-hmm. Here we are. Hello, Kay. Hello, Dolores. Hello, Steve. Thank you for sharing, Dolores. Hi, Steph. How are you? And John Sienna. Still waiting on Pavlina's book. You mean still waiting to get it? And Stephanie says, starting my sharing. I look forward to tonight's show. Thank you, Stephanie. Hey, Rock. How you doing? Great to see you here. Says, I'm listening while I wash dishes. Laugh out loud. It's a good thing to do when you're washing dishes, Rock. And Lana says, good evening. Good evening to you, Lana. Okay, so I think it's time to start our sharing for tonight. We should be able to finish Pavlina's book tonight. Pretty damn good book so far, isn't it? Here we are. You should be able to see it now. So we're on chapter 5. The title of it is What, Where, and How, Jobs, Design, and Implementation. In the midst of the Great Depression, the New Deal launched employment projects in every single county in the United States within a few short months. Franklin Roosevelt was incredibly vigorous, he and his people. They were just there. They were going to make things happen. They were going to change things, and they did. Today, these counties have unemployment offices. These make up a network of American job centers. This network is coordinated by the Department of Labor and provides the full range of support services to job seekers under one roof, except for one thing: the assurance of a decent job. The proposal in this book is to convert these unemployment offices into genuine employment offices, as discussed in Chapter 1. What would it take to do so? How could we ensure that there are enough jobs for all job seekers? What exactly would they do? How would the program be organized and managed? As we answer these questions, we hope to demonstrate that, 1, there are many existing projects and initiatives that could be scaled up for the purposes of implementing the job guarantee in a decentralized manner. 2, it is not necessary to reinvent the wheel, as we could draw on best practices from the past and from around the world. 3, there are many urgent, ongoing, and nice-to-have projects that could create millions of jobs for decades to come. And 4, the program holds significant democratizing potential. And then Pav moves into the features of the program. To deliver the counter-cyclical, structural, and preventative benefits described earlier, the job guarantee proposal suggests the following design features. The program is voluntary and inclusive. It is open to anyone of legal working age who wants to work, irrespective of labor market status, race, sex, color, or creed. It is not a replacement for traditional public works or essential government services. It is not charity or a subsidy. The people are paid to work. Neither is it a means-tested workfare policy threatening to remove a person's benefits unless they show up for work. It does, however, reduce welfare expenditures that are no longer necessary due to the living income floor the job guarantee will provide, has provided, she says. The program is also permanent and targeted in order to serve as an automatic stabilizer and tackle cyclical and structural unemployment. The base wage benefit package is fixed to establish a price anchor and a firm floor to all wages. The proposed wage is $15 per hour to hasten the national push for doubling the federal minimum wage. Because $15 may well not be enough to maintain living standards in just a few years, and I would argue it's in many counties in the United States. It's not enough now. The program would have a statutory wage benefit review every few years to adjust the figure as needed. The benefits include Social Security, health insurance, and professionalized child care, and paid leave, as the U.S. is the only major country without such leave. The program is federally funded but locally administered in a decentralized manner. It is managed by states and also municipalities, nonprofits, social enterprises, and cooperatives. Note those especially. Social enterprises, okay, and also cooperatives, which conduct assessments of local needs and design projects to meet them. There'll be more on this below. The American Job Centers would act as community job banks that solicit project proposals from local organizations. So you see the design here. Local organizations submit the project proposals, and the projects contain the jobs. Pavlina says these are the proverbial on-the-shelf jobs that are designed with care, though some experimentation would be needed and welcome. With the exception of some youth apprenticeship projects, the job guarantee would not normally create jobs in the private sector. The focus is on public service employment, so as not to compete with private sector activities and to help tackle the twin problems of poverty in the midst of plenty, quote unquote, and quote again, public squalor in the midst of private opulence, unquote. It is not a stretch to imagine many employment projects, as suggested in Chapter 1, that could be staffed with people who have different abilities and experience. More examples are provided below. Only the public sector can offer an employment guarantee. It is neither possible nor desirable to oblige firms to do so. Firm hiring is pro-cyclical, while the job guarantee is counter-cyclical. Okay, that means firm hiring occurs when the economy is up or when it's recovering, while the job guarantee is counter-cyclical. That is, job guarantee hiring tends to occur when the economy is down and the private sector is no longer hiring. Also, the private sector does not create jobs that fit the skills and needs of job seekers. Their hiring works the other way around. Workers are fitted to the job needs of private firms. The job guarantee creates more vacancies than job seekers, thus matches the employment opportunities to people's abilities. The job guarantee provides training, education, credentialing, and apprenticeship opportunities to allow people to transition out of the program into other forms of paid work. It is sensitive to the specific needs of veterans, at-risk by youths, former inmates, and people with disabilities. It prioritizes care jobs that address all forms of neglect, whether of people in need, communities in disrepair, or an environment in peril. The job guarantee proposal approaches unemployment as a public health concern, not only because of the way it affects family and community health, but also because of the way it spreads, it being unemployment. The contagion effect of mass layoffs from one area to another and from epicenter but to periphery suggests that unemployment spreads like a virus and should be treated as such. Thus, the job guarantee is designed around the concepts of preparedness and prevention. When it comes to epidemics, the national crisis response aims not to wait till the last minute. We plan, we prepare, we prevent. Consider how the Strategic National Stockpile, the nation's largest repository of essential pharmaceuticals and medical supplies, responds to public health threats. The government maintains warehouses throughout the country that can distribute vaccines, medication, and other supplies to local areas in the event of an emergency. I don't know how well the government has performed in that respect with respect to the current crisis, but that's another issue. In a similar way, the American Job Centers will solicit projects, Pavlina says, from participating local organizations on an ongoing basis to ensure that there are enough shelved projects able to provide jobs on demand. With respect to the budget, the main criterion is that it is flexible and fluctuates countercyclically. There are several ways to do this. One is to fund the program out of the general budget, as we do with Medicare Part D, making it permanently solvent without artificial constraints like trust funds. Another is to use a combination of base and supplemental appropriations, as we do with disaster and emergency relief. Payments for program wages and materials can be dispersed to state and local Department of Labor offices the same way we disperse emergency unemployment insurance benefits to those offices. The next section deals with administration and participatory democracy. While the buck stops at the Department of Labor, which must ultimately ensure the job guarantee mandate is met, the program is better administered in a decentralized manner. The cities, specifically the municipalities, in cooperation with community groups, could conduct assessment surveys, cataloging community needs and available resources as they design the community jobs banks. Community organizations, nonprofits, social entrepreneurial ventures, and cooperatives can also apply for funds directly to the Department of Labor. Grants are approved contingent on, one, creation of employment opportunities for unemployed people, no displacement effect of existing workers, and three, useful activities performed measured by their social and environmental impact. Job guarantee need not reinvent the wheel in terms of administrative infrastructure, as a fair amount of it already exists. The American Job Centers already provide payments, unemployment insurance payments, to the unemployed, job search assistance, referrals, training, GED completion, the building of resumes, English as a second language lessons, training in math and reading, and other one-on-one services such as stress and financial management courses. At the same time, localities and the municipalities and nonprofits already run projects that address public needs. All of them are understaffed and underfunded. The job guarantee will build on the existing administrative and institutional framework to match needs with resources. When we apply it globally, the administration of the program will be country specific. For example, in Argentina, a very decentralized network of community groups had designed and managed its projects, while in Brussels, a sophisticated infrastructure of employment and training options, caseworkers, and comprehensive wraparound services are provided to the unemployed by one public agency. And there's more on this below. The goal is to offer a rewarding activity that ensures social recognition and empowers participants via a bottom-up design, encouraging direct input from citizens, community members, and other stakeholders who represent the public interest in the proposal. And then, of course, there's the management and execution of the projects. Such a participatory democracy approach Can be found in many places around the world, from the zero unemployment zone experiments in France to democratically run public works projects in Brazil and Germany. Participatory budgeting models globally use citizens' assemblies, information technology, and different organizational methods to ensure citizen input on local projects and citizen input on budgeting allocations. Endorsed by international organizations such as the UN and the World Bank, participatory and gender aware budgeting significantly improves effectiveness, equity, and the overall results of such programs. Because the Job Guarantee Program encourages citizen input, puts pressure on the punitive private sector labor practices, and invests in the public good. The Job Guarantee Program can be an institution with profound democratizing tendencies, functioning as a conduit for transformative change in the workplace, in people's everyday lives, and in the economy as a whole. I think this last paragraph is very, very important. It talks about the institution of the job guarantee as providing, or beginning to provide anyway, or possibly providing, having the potential to provide democracy in the workplace, transformative change, ending in greater democracy in the workplace. If enough of this goes on, there would be transformative change in the everyday lives of people, because most people do not work in a democratic workplace. Most of the jobs in the economy do not occur in democratic workplaces. One of the potentials of the Job Guarantee Program is to create more of those kinds of workplaces in the United States. Okay, the next section specifies differences from other proposals. Before digging into the types of jobs the program could create, it is helpful to highlight some features that are specific to this proposal. The aspect that unites all job guarantees is the human rights framework and the focus on jobs with dignity and a minimum standard. The differences tend to center around the level and structure of the job guarantee wage and the program's administration and its management. The proposal presented here favors a fixed living wage with the basic benefits as opposed to tiered wages. A tiered wage structure caused a lot of wrangling of political nature during the New Deal era, and ultimately undermined support for many projects. The tiered structure also does not have the price stabilization features described earlier. The minimum wage in the program, that floor provided by the minimum wage, pressures private employers to match it, but it does not compete with them for skilled workers across the wage spectrum, which can cause wage bidding for skilled workers who already enjoy comparatively stronger income growth and better employment conditions. The goal here is to firmly secure the living wage floor. The job guarantee wage in this proposal is not indexed to inflation, so as not to embed an automatic wage price inflationary mechanism. Indeed, it incorporates in the legislation, it specifies there should be regular reviews and mandatory increases of the wage in lockstep with increases in productivity to ensure it maintains a decent living standard. Note that since the job guarantee would more than double the current minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 per hour, it could produce a one-time jump in prices if firms adjust to the new standard. However, this one-time increase should not be confused with inflation, which is a continuous increase in the price level. In 1949, the minimum wage was nearly doubled without accelerating inflation, at a time when the economy was as close to true full employment as it has ever been in the post-war era. In addition, this proposal favors a highly decentralized administration. Job guarantee workers are not typically federal employees, even though the program is federally funded. The decentralized model is preferred for several reasons. First, depending on the state of the economy, the program may need to employ as much as 10% of the labor force. This would require expanding the labor force fivefold. States, localities, and nonprofits are much better suited to accommodate such an expansion by comparison, as they already comprise about 20% of total employment. Including non-religious and non-political nonprofit organizations into the program's administration would have a significant democratizing potential. Such organizations are an important source of social innovation, and the federal government already contracts with them. Okay, if we have a plurality of local nonprofits and cooperatives, they can enhance democratic decision-making. Local advocacy groups already put pressure on the federal government to help address their constituents' concerns, and cooperatives have been shown to empower their members, increase asset creation, and reinvest in their communities. Indeed, the public purpose is already met by a broad set of intertwined institutions. Engaging them in the job guarantee design could help to broaden civil society. The present proposal also does not rely on a large-scale infrastructure for job creation. Infrastructure investment is a permanent function of the government that has been grossly underfunded and neglected. Vital levee, bridge, and highway projects should not fluctuate with the business cycle, nor should they be discontinued in expansions. And as they are often staffed with high-skilled union workers, the job guarantee must take great care not to displace them. But the job guarantee can organize smaller projects that can be added or postponed depending on economic conditions. It can also unionize its own workforce, putting in place and fortifying our nation's infrastructure to prevent, mitigate, and withstand the impact of intensifying hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, and floods. Requires immediate action and a large labor force. If a major infrastructure program were attempted as part of the Green New Deal industrial policy, the job guarantee itself would be much smaller than in its absence. Types of jobs. A National Care Act is the next section. 1,000 women on horseback. These were the roving New Deal librarians who started in 1935, brought books, and set up libraries in the most remote areas of Kentucky. The women rode across 29 counties, sometimes over 100 miles a day. Where the terrain was difficult, they dismounted their horses and carried the books on foot. Their impact was far-reaching. As one recipient put it, quote, "Them books you brought us has saved our lives," unquote. The Works Progress Administration, by WPA Library Projects, which served 45 states and employed 14,500 people, helped solve two problems at once: unemployment and illiteracy. These unskilled, unemployed women provided a public library option to the most remote regions in the nation, at a time when most of the libraries were primarily privately funded and most people had no access to books. They supported a public initiative for something we consider today to be a permanent fixture of social life. Public libraries in every corner of the country. Today, our communities have entirely different needs and a much greater capacity for solving them. Horse riding librarians are no longer needed, but there is a different kind of neglect communities suffer stemming from environmental factors and the underfunding of essential public services. Once we broaden our understanding of what is productive work, the sky is the limit for organizing projects. For example, programs to address the looming environmental challenges can create millions of public service jobs for years to come. While there's an endless, invisible environmental work that can be done by people with different skills, there is also a lot of important care work that is undervalued, underpaid, and altogether ignored. Green jobs are defined here as those that address all forms of destitution and neglect of our most valuable resources, both natural and human. Thus, the job guarantee is conceived as a national care plan that prioritizes care for the environment, care for the people, and care for the community. Three cares. Care for the environment. In 1930s, FDR's Tree Army planted 3 billion trees, created and rehabilitated 711 state parks, built 125,000 miles of truck trails, developed 800 new state parks, controlled soil erosion to 40 million acres of farmland, improved grazing conditions on public domain by ranges, and increased the wildlife population. These projects breathed a new life into the United States conservation movement, the forerunner of today's climate activism. While unemployment and the Dust Bowl presented an existential threat to many rural communities during the Great Depression, the climate crisis today is of planetary proportions. But many of the most acute environmental problems occur precisely where people live, in urban and rural settings. The infrastructure is overwhelmed by water runoff, cities are threatened by forest fires, and residential communities are nesting beside hazardous waste sites. Cities are already thinking of urban tree planting as public health infrastructure that can keep air clean and cool, that can regulate temperatures and support water quality and runoff. The environmental projects one could conceive of are endless: flood control, environmental surveys, species monitoring, tree planting, park maintenance and renewal, removal of invasive plants, and building local fisheries. Projects can create community and rooftop gardens, strengthen fire and also disaster prevention measures, weatherize homes, or launch composting and sustainable agriculture initiatives to address the food desert problem in the United States. Next, care for the community. Rebuilding the environment also means rebuilding communities. Jobs can include cleanup of vacant properties, reclaiming materials, restoration and other small infrastructure projects, setting up school gardens, urban farms, co-working spaces, solar arrays, 2 libraries and classes and programs, as well as building playgrounds, restoring historical sites, organizing community theaters, carpooling programs, recycling, reuse, and water collection, water collection initiatives, food waste programs, and oral histories projects. Care for the people. The issues facing the people live in those communities extend beyond the above-mentioned environmental challenges. There's the provision of elderly care, after-school activities, Meals on Wheels, special programs for children, at-risk youths, veterans, former inmates, and people with disabilities can all be part of the Job Guarantee Program. Since the program provides job opportunities to the very people benefiting from these programs, it also gives them agency. For example, veterans or people with disabilities can help run the very outreach programs they count on for support. Other examples could include organizing nutrition surveys in schools, health awareness programs for young mothers, adult skills classes in schools and local libraries, or extended day programs, as well as shadowing teachers, coaches, hospice workers, and librarians. The job guarantee could also organize urban campuses, co ops, classes and trainings, and apprenticeships in sustainable agriculture. All the above mentioned community care jobs could produce a new generation of urban teachers, artists, and artisans, and makers and inventors. In fact, all these tasks are already done in one form or another, but all of them are in short supply, lacking enough helping hands and a budget to employ them. The job guarantee can fill this gap and scale up already existing best practices and projects, real world programs. There's also much that can be learned from direct employment programs around the world. These are often well targeted but temporary. A notable exception is India's National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, NREGA, which, although it is not universal, enshrines the right to employment into law, guaranteeing at least 100 days of paid work to each rural household per year. Examples of other large-scale programs, past and present, include the U.S. New Deal, Argentina's Plan Jefes, South Africa's expanded public works program, and the Swedish corporatist post-war model, where the government effectively acted as an employer of last resort up until the late 1980s. During the 1930s, the New Deal pioneered large-scale public service employment when the unemployment rate in the U.S. approached 30%. An estimated 13 million workers participated in the Works Progress Administration, the largest of the jobs programs, which can be credited with bringing the United States into the 20th century. It created jobs, set up a wide range of public service initiatives, and built the infrastructure that supported the war effort and the post-war boom. Similarly, Argentina's Plan Jefes was launched in 2001 when unemployment rates exceeded 20%, but it focused primarily on smaller community programs. The New Deal and Plan Jefes demonstrated that a centralized program, the former, and a decentralized one, the latter, can be up and running on short order. Both programs had clear counter-cyclical behavior. Unemployment began to decline as a result of the New Deal in the depths of the Great Depression, but spiked again during the Roosevelt recession around, that's 1937 to 1938, when FDR briefly reversed course and tried to balance the budget. Argentina's program actually ballooned soon after implementation, hiring 13% of the labor force, and declined steadily as the economy recovered and workers transitioned to private sector employment. The Plan Jefes had a significant positive impact on workers and their families, and especially on women. Today, India's NREGA program is credited with creating many productive public assets in rural communities, wells, ponds, roads, parks, and providing needed public services such as water conservation, horticulture, flood prevention, drought proofing, and other environmental projects. The program has reduced the pay gap between men and women amongst the poor, and has helped raise wages at the bottom for private sector workers. Smaller jobs programs also offer useful insights, such as the very successful Youth Job Guarantee in Brussels, which is being expanded to all unemployed people, and the zero long-term unemployment regions in France. In the U.S., the Youth Incentive Entitlement Pilot projects, YIP, which ran from 1970 to 1980, guaranteed employment to 76,000 youth. In its short life, it sharply reduced youth unemployment in the areas where it was implemented, closing the employment to population gap that existed between black and white youths, and helping participants transition to private sector employment opportunities within 13 months, even though the guarantee was for 2 years. Since the 2009 Future Jobs Fund in the UK managed to transition 43% of its participants into permanent employment within a year before it was reformed into a punitive type of workfare program. The UK's National Institute of Economic and Social Research called it one of the most successful programs in recent history, found that it, one, enhanced public service work, two, was well targeted to the most disadvantaged youth groups, the long-term unemployed, three, improved their specialized and transferable skills and employability, and four, reduced their time on welfare. Today, small direct job creation programs are scattered around the United States. In Albuquerque, the city government gives jobs to homeless people, successfully connecting them to permanent employment and housing, inspiring other municipalities to do the same. Various programs that place ex-cons into jobs boast significant reductions in recidivism rates. There are also urban programs for at-risk youths and the unemployed who work in farm lots, cottage businesses, co-working spaces, greenhouses, solar arrays, tool libraries, aquaponics, community gardens, taking classes and organizing after-school activities and other projects. These are just a few examples of the kinds of projects that can be fostered and expanded, giving an idea of what the job guarantee in the United States might look like. Concerns and frequently asked questions is the next section. We have thus far dispensed with the assumption that unemployment is necessary to stabilize the economy, but the idea that the federal government should be responsible for job creation always invokes some immediate worries. In particular, that the job guarantee would, one, mean a big government takeover, two, be impossible to manage, three, reduce productivity, four, create some make-work projects, five, be dangerously disruptive to the point of stoking a political revolution. There's some additional issues concerned. Six, the impact of technology on jobs in general. That is, isn't technology making all jobs obsolete? Seven, the program's counter-cyclical features. Is it even possible to add and shed workers on short notice? And even if it is, shouldn't socially useful projects be staffed on a permanent basis? And eight, the political obstacles the program would face. When politicians and firms ensure that it just won't happen. We will address each of these concerns in turn. So, on big government takeover, the worry about big government has it backwards. We already have big government, quote unquote, devoting hundreds of billions of dollars, time, resources, and administrative effort to dealing with the economic and social costs of unemployment, underemployment, and poverty. As noted, unemployment is already paid for, possibly many times over. The job guarantee would reduce these federal government costs, while also cutting costs to households, firms, and states. Far from being a big government takeover, the size of the job guarantee largely depends on the private sector. How many jobs are private firms creating? Are they hiring or automating and outsourcing? How many mass layoffs are in the pipeline? The job guarantee responds to changes in the private sector, acting as an economic stabilizer and providing an economic cushion to families. So it doesn't take over. It provides a safety net to cushion the blows that are delivered by the private sector when it gives up employing certain people. On administration, just as we do not think there is an optimal level of illiteracy, we do not think public education must be scrapped because it is an administrative nightmare, quote unquote. And yet the managerial challenges associated with running a job guarantee program are often used as a litmus test of its desirability. Apart from the unique double standard applied to the job guarantee, one rarely hears such objections to nation building or financial bailouts. It is hardly evident that running it would be an impossibly difficult task. Indeed, history suggests otherwise. Today, public schools in the U.S. guarantee primary and secondary education to nearly 51 million students. The Medicare and Medicaid and CHIP programs serve 74 million people, and Social Security covers 54 million people. Total spending on these programs is approximately 14% of GDP. By comparison, the Job Guarantee Program aims to employ 11 to 15 million people to the tune of 1 to 1.5% of GDP. And while it does no one any good to deny that there will be administrative hurdles specific to the program, they seem no more formidable than those of other policy priorities. The proposal outlined here aims to alleviate them by using as much of the existing institutional infrastructure as possible and facilitating a process of job creation from the bottom up. On productivity, the claim the job guarantee would be unproductive is also upside down. Employing someone is not less productive than keeping them unemployed. And given the deleterious effects of joblessness on individual and family well-being, one could argue that the productivity of the unemployed is actually negative, while the job guarantee provides on-the-job training and education. Individuals who enjoy relative job security are happier, are more dependable, and all around more productive in the workplace. Green projects rehabilitate the environment, strengthen communities, and improve the social determinants of health. Care jobs for the young and elderly, along with jobs for artists and musicians, are incorrectly considered unproductive by the narrowest of measures. Yet they too increase productivity by enhancing overall welfare and quality of life. On make work and false choices, the fear that job guarantee projects would necessarily be make work amounts to what Jamie Galbraith called an admission of impotence and a call for preemptive surrender. Indeed, New Deal projects were often derided as boondoggles, yet they rebuilt communities, the economy, and people's lives. The make work, quote unquote, canard, however, is not entirely ideological. A charitable interpretation is that it stems from a confusion over purpose. Is the job guarantee a program that actually provides jobs to everyone who needs one? Or is it a program that creates projects that are productive? If it is a policy for useful work, the argument goes it cannot possibly employ everyone. If it is a policy for the unemployed, then it cannot possibly be productive. These, of course, are false choices. The program is productive because it eliminates the negative return from joblessness and because it stabilizes the economy better than unemployment. However, jobs programs that fail to reaffirm the access to a basic job as a human right will inevitably fail to answer the questions that troubled the New Deal projects. Who should be employed? Are they skilled enough? Are the projects useful? Shouldn't they be staffed with more skilled workers? When the emphasis is on the project rather than on the person, it invariably becomes difficult to advocate for jobs for all. That becomes possible when the emphasis is on the scourge of unemployment and the need to guarantee the basic economic right to a job. On the program's disruptive effects. In the IT world, disruptions are hailed as progressive and innovative. One innovation of the Job Guarantee Program is that it compels firms to match its living wage floor. Now, this goal would be reached faster if the federal minimum wage were also increased as the program was being implemented. For some critics, this is dangerous because workers outside the program would realize they do not enjoy the decent pay, health care, and child care of job guarantee workers and might stage a political rebellion, quote unquote. But this critique is a thinly veiled argument in support of the firm's privilege to pay poverty wages. That's what I've always thought. These firms want the right, the privilege to pay poverty wages. The job guarantee would take that away from them. A similar critique plagued the New Deal Civil Works Administration. As Philip Harvey notes, the problem with the CWA was not that it was unpopular, but that it was widely popular. Firms, not their workers, protested that the program offered too much job security, and Southern racist employers argued that the higher public wages were ruining black workers, giving them the, quote, wrong incentives, unquote. Farmers complained they were losing cheap farm workers to the more stable civil public works, even though the CWA wages were well below the national average. Okay, the political attack came under the usual pretext the program was busting the federal budget, that it was time to cancel it and replace it with the dole. Had Roosevelt reauthorized the program, it may have been impossible to ever end it. This was the verdict of FDR's conservative director of the budget, Lewis Douglas, who was no friend of the CWA. Workers liked the program and started to regard the projects it offered as their rights, as something the government owed them. It is true that one major goal of the job guarantee is to disrupt those businesses that can only be successful by paying poverty wages. Uh, but to euthanize poverty paying jobs through the job guarantee is a feature, not a bug of the program. And the complaints will come from firms, not their workers. Even in the midst of the Great Depression, firms wanted to keep the threat of the sack and much preferred a welfare system that subsidized their access to cheap labor. But there is no reason to believe the job guarantee will be violently disruptive to the private sector. As discussed above, our model indicates that it significantly increases real GDP and private sector employment. In reality, although firms protest all increases in the minimum wage, they have no trouble matching them, and the economic benefits of raising wages are well documented. Critics also want us to fear the impact the job guarantee will have on public employment. The worries that the program's living wage floor would induce both the private and public sectors to engage in race to the bottom wage cutting to match the guaranteed floor. This critique implies that instituting a public option, any public option, degrades the existing benefits of people who may not need to access it. It is like saying that Social Security should not have been implemented because it would have reduced both government and private pensions. But in the United States, even federal workers who have Social Security enjoy supplemental federal public retirement plans. Public options do not create a race to the bottom, says Pavlina. They raise and secure the floor. That is a short sentence, a hard hitting sentence to keep in mind. Public options do not create a race to the bottom. They raise and secure the floor. On technology, anxieties around technological change are understandable, but it is important to distinguish between two separate questions. Will technology automate a lot of existing jobs? Yes, they will. And will technology cause a jobs apocalypse, quote unquote? Hardly inevitable. Indeed, as technology changes our lives, the vast majority of jobs of the future have not even been invented yet. Yet the most dangerous jobs are not being automated quickly enough, e.g., trucking, meat processing, or electric power line installation. Many of the perilous jobs that also pillage the earth need to be made obsolete um, altogether, not automated. For example, onshore and offshore drilling. There is no, quote, iron law of technology, unquote, that makes the elimination of certain jobs obligatory. Society chooses how to adopt technology. Despite innumerable online courses, we still pay a premium for high quality in person instruction. Apps, smart boards, and other programs have transformed school curricula, but not the focus on personal contact and interactive forms of learning. Hospice care is not done through a television set, and personal care is still the norm. Despite the glum by resignation, tech change seems to invite. Technology is not the enemy. Jobs are disappearing not because the robots are marching in, but because management, in pursuit of aggressive cost cutting, has pitted workers against the machines. Indeed, given the looming environmental problems, technology will be a critical factor in solving them and solving them fast. Does that mean that we cannot find useful things for humans to do? Not at all. Is there a limit to the many ways in which we can serve each other in our communities? Probably not. This is why this job guarantee proposal is conceived as a National Care Act. Technological change notwithstanding, we can create many jobs for people that are socially useful, and technology can be embraced as a way of improving our standard of living, not as a force that threatens it. Next section is on the practicality of cyclical employment. Critics also worry the job guarantee cannot function as an effective automatic stabilizer. Can we really create jobs on demand? If they're so useful, why let job guarantee workers go when the economy recovers? The criticism fails to recognize that the private sector behaves cyclically already. The ability to absorb or shed employees is not a unique challenge for the job guarantee. Indeed, every labor market segment within the private, nonprofit, or public sectors deals with new entrants and job leavers on an ongoing basis. It is in the nature of the structural and cyclical changes of the economy. But because the job guarantee is a better stabilizer than unemployment, it would significantly reduce the current yo-yo effect in labor markets. Smaller fluctuations in private employment meet smaller fluctuations in the job guarantee and easier transitions, removing the challenge of accommodating large swaths of people on short notice. In addition, once the program has been established, many of the specific projects described above could be scaled up or scaled down by relatively quickly as workers enter or leave the job guarantee. Essential and ongoing public services need to be staffed on a permanent basis. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Food and Drug Administration are in need of many more inspectors, but these are not temporary job guarantee jobs. Similarly, with respect to the professionalized child care benefit of the program, it should be noted this too would be a mainline government function, although these child care centers could hire temporary trainees and teacher assistants through the program. Um, but the area of actual professionalized, affordable child care is permanent infrastructure. It is a public option for child care. Whether working parents have jobs in the job guarantee program or elsewhere, they would still need child care. On power and political challenges is next. For several decades, surveys have polled whether the government should guarantee jobs to the unemployed, and the results have shown consistent majority support, over 60%, and more recently as high as 78%. See the next chapter for details. These figures show that the program bridges the ideological divide and resonates with voters across the political spectrum. Yet policymakers have not been paying attention until now. In the U.S., several presidential hopefuls have endorsed the job guarantee, and dozens of candidates for office at the local and national level have adopted it in their platforms. It was also included as a signature program in the Green New Deal resolution. There has been a groundswell of support for it from many corners of civil society. The moment is ripe for change, and the electorate, especially young voters, are looking for bold solutions to entrenched economic and environmental problems. The opposition from vested interests should not be underestimated. Yes, um, yes, Michael Koleski warned that captains of industry would oppose full employment vigorously, but they opposed the minimum wage too. the reduction of the working week, and the creation of Social Security, and banning child labor, and allowing women to control their property and earnings, and on and on. Securing the job guarantee is another step in a long process of securing economic rights for all. In some ways, we understand, okay, the nature of the opposition and the obstacles better today than in the past. First, implementing employment programs as emergency measures in downturns ensures their rapid expiration date. Second, without the legal right to employment, even quasi full employment regimes such as in Sweden and Japan could not survive the Reagan Thatcher revolution. Third, the existence of a legal right would not mean that programs would be void of problems, but it would provide the institutional basis for securing the mandate over the long run, even under a neoliberal regime. Some local governments in India, for example, are extending the popular rural employment program to young people in urban areas, and farmers and workers are demanding a nationwide extension to all urban unemployed persons. In the U.S., the electorate is engaged in a post-Reagan era rehabilitation of government and the public purpose, opening a window of opportunity to finally secure this fundamental economic right. On affordability, the federal government has all the financial resources at its disposal to implement the job guarantee. But despite the program's popularity, the fight for essential public services has never been a fair one. Perhaps the most pernicious tool captains of industries have employed against policies in the public interest is the myth that federal government spending depends on the tax revenue the state can collect from them. Any struggle for economic emancipation must challenge this folktale head on, else progressive policies will be forever hostage to sound finance ideology. To grapple with the large structural and institutional obstacles that make fighting for working people so hard, one must at a minimum confront the greatest ideological tool the rich and powerful had at their disposal: the myth that they pay for everything. None of this is easy, quote unquote, but there is no use pretending that the obstacles are insurmountable. Most arguments against the job guarantee have in the past been raised in opposition to other essential public policies. That is the nature of the politics of fear. There are no compelling moral or economic reasons to continue business as usual. It is no surprise that government employment policies are very popular, and so is the job guarantee, as we will see in the next and final chapter. The question is, what should we fear more? A world in which a living wage job is secured for all, or a world where mass unemployment remains the norm? Okay. I love that chapter. The reason why I love it is because after talking about the design of the program, there is a systematic discussion, okay, of all the major objections which have been leveled against the job guarantee idea, and a refutation of each one of the objections. So this discussion is very comprehensive, it's very systematic, it often is on the border, okay, of eloquent. It's just a very good job. So on to the final chapter: the job guarantee, the Green New Deal, and beyond. When the job guarantee re-entered the political discourse in the U.S. in 2018, a number of surveys tried to gauge, okay, its popularity. A Hill-Harris Expo from October 2019 found that a whopping 78% of voters supported the job guarantee, including 71% of Republicans, 87% of Democrats, 81% of independents, 78% of leaning conservative, and 52% of strongly conservative voters. So tell me, if we really have a democracy and the polling results are like this, why don't we have a job guarantee and a living wage right now? This in itself tells you that our democracy is gone and that we have to reclaim it. Anyway, going on with Pavlina's work. Few policies, few policies have such overwhelming bipartisan support. One polling firm, Civis Analytics, which used a deliberately partisan framing, still found that a majority of voters, 52%, supported the program, including 58% of Obama to Trump voters and 32% of Trump voters, calling it one of the most popular issues we've ever polled. Looking at the state level, another polling firm, Data for Progress, found strong support in deep Republican states as well. Mississippi, 72%, Georgia, 71%, Kansas, 67%, West Virginia, 62%, and Indiana, 61%. I wonder what the percent was in Kentucky. I wonder if Data for Progress had such data. Each of these states has higher than average unemployment and poverty rates where the job guarantee could have a big impact. I wonder how much Charlie Booker emphasized the job guarantee as part of the Green New Deal in his program. And that's a map of popular support for the job guarantee, figure 5. And that's from Data for Progress by Sean McElwee, is one of the founders of Data for Progress. Once paired with the Green New Deal agenda, Data for Progress finds that overall program support increases to 55%. When it is framed as green, it also becomes more popular among Trump voters by 14% than a job guarantee without the green framing. But the public has always supported job creation and specifically programs where the government acts as an employer of last resort. 2013 Gallup poll reported between 72 and 77% of respondents supported government employment programs and job creation laws that would employ the unemployed. Another study found that 68% of the general public thought that the government should see to it that everyone who wants work should find a job. 53% supported the idea of the government itself providing jobs to the unemployed as a last resort. The long-standing Kinder Houston area study by the Kinder Institute for Urban Research has been polling since 1989 whether, quote, the government should see to it that everyone who wants to work can find a job, unquote, finding consistently that over 64% of respondents supported the idea. After the great financial crisis, that number edged up to 69% in 2009. By 2016, 76% of people believed it was the government's responsibility to ensure that everyone who wanted a job had one. Like other polls, the Kinder survey shows that government employment policies are more important than other redistribution and poverty-reducing measures. Table 3 shows support for government job creation and employer of last resort policies, and this is from the study by Page, and I think it's Page, K, and Jacobs, if I recall correctly. Okay, Benjamin I. Page et al. Democracy and the Policy Preferences of Wealthy Americans, Perspectives on Politics, 2013. That was a study that came out of Princeton. The government in Washington ought to see to it that everyone who wants to work and find a job, 68%. Government should provide jobs for everyone who cannot find a job in private employment. And there's some more data from that particular study, all supporting the idea that we should have a job guarantee. In Figure 6, that last was Figure 6, dealing with regional support for government employment by programs, and that was produced by the Kinder Institute for Urban Research in 2016. In sum, with or without a green framing, the majority of Americans support not only government employment programs, but also employer of last resort and job guarantee programs in particular. Situating the job guarantee within the green agenda, this book has argued that the job guarantee in purpose, design, and impact is inherently a green proposal, addressing the two critical types of neglect and devastation in the economy, those of our natural and our human resources. While the job guarantee has been called the most crucial component of the Green New Deal, there is a fair amount of confusion among both critics and sympathizers about whether a net zero emissions agenda should be muddled with policies like guaranteeing jobs, healthcare, and housing. The short answer to this question is that there are no purely technological fixes to the climate catastrophe that is barreling towards us. Climate policy is social and economic policy. Every climate solution and the manner of its implementation will have deep economic, social, and political ramifications. To answer the question of how to tackle the climate threat is necessarily to answer the question of how to reorganize our social and economic life. The challenge before us is not just about switching our production techniques. If the inequities in the current system are not addressed, then by definition, a new technique of production would not ensure a sustainable and livable future. Would adequate housing be accessible to all if we weatherized our buildings? Would food deserts and food insecurity be wiped out if we moved from industrial to regenerative agriculture? Would gaps in public transportation be fixed if we electrified our transport systems? Would this new world actually provide economic security for all? Or would unemployment and poorly paid employment continue to be the norm, and access to basic necessities, even if produced by green techniques, remain out of reach for many? The living wage job guarantee embeds social justice into the climate response. That's such an important statement, such an important point. Remember it, quote it, repeat it. The living wage job guarantee embeds social justice into the climate response. It recognizes that fixing the environment takes work, that many who want decent paid work cannot find it, that paid work must support traditionally undervalued activities like environmental conservation and community upkeep, that the work experience for millions of people needs to be rehabilitated with better working conditions, essential benefits, and a sharper focus on individual and community needs. The job guarantee also recognizes that public service must improve the lives of those who cannot work. And while the program is not the panacea to all forms of economic insecurity or socioeconomic problems, it is the cornerstone of a modern economic Bill of Rights, that tapestry of policies that constitute the Green New Deal agenda. And that statement, another very, very essential point. It completes, or would go very far to completing, the economic Bill of Rights of Franklin Roosevelt. In the context of the Green New Deal agenda. As proposed in this book, the job guarantee is designed around care and environmental stewardship and uses democratic and participatory processes in the creation of projects and employment opportunities. There are, however, two different ways in which the idea of guaranteeing jobs has been used in the contemporary climate discourse. The first, which most closely resembles the proposal in this book, aims to guarantee a job with a family-sustaining wage, adequate family and but also medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security to all people of the United States. The second focuses on ensuring that the Green New Deal mobilization creates high-quality union jobs that pay prevailing wages and guarantees wage and benefit parity for workers affected by the transition. Both of these guarantees are articulated in the Green New Deal resolution. Some policy proposals specifically guarantee job training and priority job placement of fossil fuel workers, along with 5 years of their current salary or an early retirement option with pension support. How should we understand the nature of these guarantees and the way they intersect, with one another? The next section deals with that. It's called Industrial Mobilization and the Job Guarantee. In distinguishing between the different guarantees and assurances, we need to remember the Green New Deal, too, has several components. It is a broad-based industrial policy. 2, it is an agenda for securing economic rights. And 3, it is a new social contract with all working people that does not leave behind those who have toiled in the fossil fuel industry for decades. The first aspect of the Green New Deal is the wholesale transformation that is necessary to produce a rapid and robust answer to global warming. This is the all-hands-on-deck industrial strategy that has been called the, quote, moonshot of our time, unquote, and likened to, quote, wartime mobilization, unquote. This component requires all the technological know-how, skill, and expertise necessary to achieve the engineering feat of transforming the production system from fossil fuels to clean energy. It creates quality union jobs with the prevailing wages to reverse the extraordinary hollowing out of middle-income jobs in a labor market. But industrial policy is not the same thing as full employment policy, though it may temporarily produce full employment during the mobilization phase of the green transformation. The second aspect of the Green New Deal thus ensures that through a mixture of policy measures, this industrial strategy results in economic security for all. The job guarantee is one of those measures. It is the safety net that is especially needed by people who are most vulnerable to the ravages of climate change and most susceptible to mass layoffs in the transition process. Finally, the job guarantee offers the basis for a new social contract by establishing a new labor standard, ousting unemployment as a macroeconomic stabilizer and preventing its social and economic costs. The social contract also pays its dues, so to speak, to workers in mining and oil exploration who have depended on the fossil fuel industry for their livelihoods and have disproportionately borne the health effects of these jobs. Both low and high-skilled fossil fuel workers would need to transition to the green economy. The skilled chemists, geologists, and engineers would join the wholesale mobilization effort perhaps more easily than the roustabouts, deckhands, and day laborers. Though if the World War II mobilization is any indication, all manner of skills will be needed for the Green New Deal as well. For those who are left behind in the transition, the living wage job guarantee would be a crucial safety net. It should not be difficult to meet the promise to fossil fuel workers either. In the U.S., there are only 516,000 non-supervisory workers in the mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction industries, 89,000 in oil and gas extraction, 148,000 in mining and quarrying, and the rest in support activities like exploration. An income safety net or early retirement can be provided to those who have toiled away on rigs and in mines, as well as generous disability support for those for those who are afflicted with black lung disease or other health problems. But for those who wish to work, the Employment Office would assist in finding opportunities with comparable pay in the green economy. During the transformation, it may be hard to clearly separate the mobilization jobs from job guarantee jobs. The proposal here is to draft separate legislation for the job guarantee to ensure its longevity beyond the Green New Deal. Both would require the public sector to take a leadership role in creating large-scale investment initiatives and smaller public service employment projects for those left behind. But analytically, and as a matter of legislature structure and institutional design. It is important to separate the two for the following reason. Imagine that the mobilization effort has done its job. Temperatures have stabilized, zero emissions targets have been reached, and the energy grid and food production system have been transformed. What would happen next? Could we afford to honorably discharge the job guarantee? The answer is no, because this transformation would not expunge the cyclical and structural variations of the economy. We failed to secure the right to work during the Roosevelt revolution when we closed down the New Deal programs. We temporarily achieved full employment through the wartime period, okay, and the mobilization there, but were unprepared to maintain full and living wage employment for all during the peacetime post-war economy without an employment safety net. The goal of a useful and a remunerative job for all was abandoned, and the new zombie full employment concept, the Nairu, was born. Whatever green future we produce will be neither just nor equitable if it continues to tolerate mass unemployment. In the 1930s, we re-envisioned the role of the state and implemented radical policy reforms in a few short years. We created a transformative safety net, secured large-scale public investment, passed critical labor laws, but the safer, more stable economic reality was out of reach for many. Housing and school policies were segregated. Women could not access the jobs and wages of their husbands, and industrial farming continued to employ immigrants and racial minorities and the poor in the most terrible labor and living conditions. The labor standard was not secured, and progress in all of these areas has been slow. And the Green New Deal is another such watershed such watershed moment. The scale of the response needed is comparable to what was required to tackle the Great Depression and a second devastating World War. The policies we design today would usher in a new economy. In the big battle to save the planet, implementing the job guarantee is a comparatively small but critical component. If the Green New Deal brings a broader socialization of investment in essential public goods, transportation, housing, electricity, healthcare, and childcare, economic volatility would decline much the same way it did after World War II. Prior to the New Deal of the 1930s, the U.S. economy had experienced a depression every 20 years and many smaller downturns in between. The Green New Deal holds the promise of stabilizing the economy in comparable ways. However, it will not end the business cycle. While cyclical fluctuations will hardly be expunged, the fact that they are smaller would mean the size of the job guarantee would also be smaller. As a permanent part of the policy landscape, it would continue to provide an employment safety net and a macroeconomic stabilization mechanism, even if as we transition to a cleaner, more stable, and more just economy. And then the concluding section, the missing global employment policy. By focusing on the U.S. case, we have run the risk of suggesting that the job guarantee is a policy option accessible only to economic hegemons. This is not the case, not least because some of the largest job creation programs and the only introduction of a legal right to employment have been implemented in developing countries, South Africa, Argentina, India. Economic hegemons can, of course, lead the way, but a global pledge to tackle unemployment once and for all would not be unprecedented. The world came to a similar conclusion after World War II when it drafted the International Trade Organization Charter. Explicit in the first two chapters was a clear global mandate to ensure that each nation implemented policies for attaining and maintaining full employment over the long run as a precondition for free trade. When the ITO was not ratified and the WTO succeeded it, the full employment mandate was dropped from the agenda. Today, many nations rely on export-led growth for job creation and engage in race-to-the-bottom labor practices to win what is essentially an unwinnable job creation war. Unemployment and precarious employment are global phenomena. Today, the global community is engaged in a new conversation, not about how to integrate peacefully through trade, but about how to address the planetary climate emergency. Global institutions and international accords require a commitment to full and decent employment the same way global trade once required it but failed to achieve it. The 2015 Paris Agreement was an important first step, highlighting that climate justice rests on, quote, human rights, the imperatives of a just transition of the workforce, and the creation of decent work and quality jobs in accordance with nationally defined development priorities. While the job guarantee proposal presented here has been pitched as a nation-specific policy, it could form the basis of a global Marshall Plan that tackles the twin threats of environmental and economic insecurity. No workfare, no bullshit jobs, quote unquote, no compulsory work, no digging holes, a global Green New Deal with a green job guarantee. And that is the way that Pavlina Tcherneva ends her book with a vision and a hope for the future, that what we can do for the United States, we can also extend to the globe, to all, okay, of humankind. That is something that we should not only hope for, but all work towards. What I want to say now is, okay, if we take these two books, The Deficit Myth, okay, and The Case for the Job Guarantee, and we put them together, we see much more of the full vision, okay, of MMT. And we also may come to realize that when it comes to policy, to concrete policies, the job guarantee is the jewel in the crown, okay, of MMT. It is the leading MMT policy for full employment and price stability. And having that in green jobs, in jobs that are about care, that are about public purpose, and that are about democracy. It aims to create more democracy in the workplace and democracy in the shaping and the definition of the temporary public purpose jobs themselves. And if new social ventures and new cooperatives are founded through the job guarantee program, one of the effects of the job guarantee would be to create many more cooperatives in the economies of the Western world. And cooperatives are places characterized by democracy in the workplace. And that is part of what we are looking for here, a big part of what we're looking for here. We're not only talking about climate justice and social justice and economic justice, but we're talking about democracy too, and political justice as well. And democracy not only in the public sphere, but I should say in the governmental sphere, but also in the small government sphere of economic enterprises. Mostly in the United States today, there's no democracy in the workplace. What there is instead is basically monarchy in the workplace, okay? Oligarchy in the workplace. But the place where many of us spend 8-hour days for most of the year, okay, is not a democracy. And we have very few, if any, rights in that particular workplace context. Now, the job guarantee can help to end that. So it is a revolutionary policy. And that is one reason why I say it's the jewel in the crown, okay, of MMT. I'll now consider your comments. And see what your thoughts are. Stephanie says, hey, Rocco. Stephanie says, hey, Sandy, Lana, Kay, and all my friends are on here tonight. Stephanie says, I'm doing okay, Dr. Joe, hanging in there. That's great news, Steph. I'm really happy. Kay says, hey, Steph and Jeannie Trujenkins waves. Hi, Jeannie. Rocco says, a lot of people I talk to don't understand what countercyclical means. But our economy goes up and down, economic good times and bad times. The FJG expands when the economy is bad, and the FJG shrinks in economic good times to balance the ups and downs of the market. Very good, Rocco. It's good to remind us of that not everybody knows what countercyclical means. That is an economic jargon term. Evelina says capacitación for transición is the best part. And Evelina says transition. Sandy says shared. Rocco says, okay, I got to get this book. It's a fairly inexpensive book. I think it was, I forget what I paid. Okay, but I got it as a Kindle book. And it was very inexpensive. I think it was similar in cost to one of my books. Okay, because it's shorter than most. The actual text of the book is about 128 pages. Then there are footnotes, of course, and other things, and there's an index in it, which helps people to find places. Altogether, it's about 148 pages. But if anyone has questions about the job guarantee, feel free to post them here in the chat. Dr. Joe usually reads the comments and responds while still live. Yes, and I will tonight. But also, we are going to have a Q&A tomorrow on both the deficit myth and the job guarantee, and really any other questions people have, as a follow-up to this, because I think these two books are enormously important. And Carmen says, let's see if I have any luck with my device tonight, and nope, connection gone. Well, we're about to see Avril again. Okay, and Evelina says, went very well in Argentina during the Kirchner administration. I know. And Christina Kirchner is back, right? At least as vice president.
Lana Dell says, I ordered mine and also would like the audible version, same as the deficit myth. I can do something else while listening. Stephanie says, okay, finally done sharing. Oh, you finished that pretty quickly, Stephanie, considering. Rocco says, just think, with the federally guaranteed living wage job program, people have extreme mobility because they can move anywhere and have living wage work. I know that's one of the things I love about it. So workers could unite to force a city or town to represent them or face a mass exodus, which would cost the local government their tax base and ability to operate. It gives people so much more power in so many ways. Rocco, thank you for pointing out that is a very important point that was not covered in Pavlina's book, but it's a very important political point. And Sandy says, hi, Rocco. And Rocco says, hi, Sandy. And Dawn Foster says, has it been done before? Do other countries do this? That's covered in Pavlina's book. I went over it. No. The first country, if we passed the job guarantee today, the specific proposal of Pavlina, we would be the first one to do that for everybody. The India program is only for rural people. The HEFES program in Argentina was primarily a part-time program and a stopgap. But Pavlina's program would be a permanent program. It would be the first one in the world that would create true full employment in the sense that whoever wants a job can get a job offer and can get a job but from the federal government. If they want a part-time job, they can get a part-time job. If they want a full-time job, they can get a full-time job. John T. Harvey, writer for Forbes, went hard for a federal jobs guarantee in his article and made my heart smile. Yeah, John T. Harvey is an MMT economist. He is. He's one of us. Evelini says, that it was promptly dismantled by Macri. Yes. Again, with Alberto Fernandez, the plan is to return to the federal job guarantee as a counter-cyclical method. That's wonderful. That would be wonderful, okay, for Argentina. If only Argentina could get a fiat currency, if only it could tell the World Bank and the IMF and the other neoliberals to go to hell, default on that debt, and get its sovereign currency back, Argentina could become a great nation once again. And Rocco says, not exactly the same, but America targeted full employment not for most of our history, Rocco, not for most of our history. Targeted full employment from the 30s until the 70s, when we started targeting unemployment with the natural rate, okay, of unemployment. The full employment policies of the New Deal made America number one and created a middle class that was the envy of the world, with top-notch public health care and education, okay, and infrastructure. You could get a job straight out of high school and raise a family with a house and car on just that one income because of, oops. Avril says, that graph means a ton of people are in a world of shit. Time for that federal job guarantee. This is when we sorely need a counter-cyclical tool where the federal government funds grants with our sovereign fiat dollars to states and local communities to function as the employer of last resort. No, they don't function as the employer, okay, of last resort in that sense, because the money, the funding, still comes from the federal government and goes directly to the employee. Okay. Also, the employees are not the states directly or the municipalities directly. Okay. the employees are the projects directly under this particular proposal. Now, there are stakeholders who approve of the projects, and some of them will be from the state governments and some from the local governments, but some also from local private stakeholders and from the participants themselves. But it's the projects, the locally defined projects, the community defined projects, which will function as the employers in the sense that they actually supervise and implement the projects along with the workers on the projects, the employees. Of course, they would all be employees of the projects. But as I say, the wages, the money will come directly from the federal government into the pockets of the employees. And the reason for that is that in the federal job guarantee, we do not want the intermediaries to skim off the top. Their expenses are covered separately, are invoiced separately, and are paid to them separately, and they have to justify the expenses. And remember, if you don't like the word guarantee, you can have either a guaranteed federally funded job or guaranteed unemployment. Basic unemployment programs were not designed for this type of work. That's quite true. Alana says the FJG has a few positives, sets the word floor. Okay, it eliminates involuntary unemployment, benefits the community, would be available to nonviolent offenders. It has more positives than that. It is a guarantee of freedom to work for those who want to work. The right to work is a freedom. It's an aspect, okay, of freedom. It's one of the economic rights that was expounded by Franklin Roosevelt in 1944. That is the most important positive that it has. That the government guarantees the freedom to have a job at a living wage with good fringe benefits for as long as a person wants to work and get satisfaction out of work. It becomes a right of the workers. Evelina says, the Rocco Million, but into the 80s, it was still fairly customary. Residual effect. No, it wasn't customary to aim for full employment. It was no longer customary to aim for full employment. I think we gave up the idea that we had to aim for full employment during the Carter administration, actually. That was when people gave it up. I think Carter gave it up. He really did. His administration had people in it who began to believe in the NAIRU. The idea was circulating at the time. Influential economists who had influence in the Carter administration were propounding, the idea. People wanted an excuse because they failed to create a full employment situation. Those in the government wanted an excuse for not having full employment, for not being able to achieve it. And the excuse was that it was impossible because of the NAIRU. And nobody thought about, well, what happens if we just give people, I shouldn't say nobody thought about it, because Martin Luther King thought about it and other people then, but the people in the government would not think about just having a job guarantee program. Evelina said, I guess, because I remember. Lana says, I still really feel like the FJG would greatly reduce crime. She said, I really feel. Me too. A lot of people would not rob and steal if they had a decent job. I think so too. If they could make ends meet and they didn't have all kinds of stress on them because they had a decent job with good benefits, it would cause a great reduction in deviant behavior of all kinds, including crime. Stephanie said, "This is truly awesome. Wish we had that kind of dedication now." We can have that kind of dedication again, Stephanie. Sandy Deggs, Trump's father took advantage of the New Deal building homes. That's how he built the Trump brand. Now his son is president during a new depression, and ignores the problems instead of giving back to the country. Rocco says, "Yep, I say it all the time, giving people living wage work and social mobility, and they will not risk what they have to riot and commit crimes. But when we systemically disenfranchise millions with involuntary unemployment and starvation wages and police terror, crime is going to be bad." Sandy Degg says, "Took." Evelina says, "For sure, goes without saying." Kay says, "We need another tree army now badly." Kay says, "Yes, desperately." Rocco says, "So much work America needs done, yet we target unemployment, leaving millions unemployed and millions more working poor in the starvation wage environments that creates. It's untapped productive capacity while millions suffer under artificial scarcity." Absolutely, Rocco Million. Evelina says, the Rocco Million, besides, it's criminal disenfranchising millions, even if people didn't riot, which incidentally they hadn't done until it became unavoidable. And Kay says, community gardens everywhere, too. Exactly, community gardens everywhere. Rocco says, I'm sorry, Evelina says, the Rocco, even if they didn't riot, disenfranchising millions is criminal. Avril says, after school homework assistance. Yes, that would be one of the jogs, I'm sure. Sandy says, hi, Kay. Kay says, hi, Sandy. Stephanie says, that's a good one. I didn't think about that. Avril says, thank you. Avril says, imagine how a hashtag FJG would help curb human trafficking, especially if it could include non-citizens. I wouldn't have a problem with that. Avril, sometimes immigrants know more than we do about some things. Avril says it would close the poverty desperation gap for sure and disrupt from the hood to prison for profit pipelines. Avril says agreed. Evelina says you need to capacitate civil society, ordinary citizens to deal with climate events. They do this in socialist nations with very good results. Less deaths to start with. It just makes sense. Yes, it does. Avril could invest in those hoods to make them better too. Yep. Evelina says, perhaps too much sense. Laugh out loud. What does countercyclical mean, guys? I feel like an idiot. Okay, as Rocco said earlier, pro-cyclical means spending when times are good. In other words, when the economy doesn't actually need more spending, there is more spending. Oh, when the economy is growing, you spend into a growing economy. And countercyclical means the opposite. It means that you spend into an economy that is contracting. Now, private business people find it very hard to do that because they're bucking the economic trends. So private sector businesses generally spend only on a pro-cyclical basis and only hire on a pro-cyclical basis. But the government has the power to hire people and to spend countercyclically when the business cycle is down, not when the business cycle is up, and not simply down and up, but when the business cycle is falling, when it's actually collapsing. When the economy is in a collapsing mode, the government has the power to spend into the collapse and to put a floor on the collapse and to turn the economy around. That's what counter-cyclical spending means. The job guarantee is a counter-cyclical program because it spends more when times are bad or when the economy is collapsing than it does when the private economy is doing well, when the private sector is doing well, when it is expanding, okay, the economy. So that's what counter-cyclical means. I hope you understand it now. Evelina says, perhaps too sensible, laugh out loud. Evelina says, not less, but fewer. And Lana says, when the economy is up and there are plenty of jobs, the FJG would reduce in size. And opposite, when the economy goes downhill and jobs are lost, the FJG would expand. The FJG expands counter-cyclically and shrinks pro-cyclically. And Stephanie says, Lana Dell, thank you. Evelina says, people could get so excited by the federal job guarantee under the Green New Deal. I mean, they could. If we have the Green New Deal and the job guarantee, all those poor communities in Appalachia, in Virginia, in Kentucky, in Tennessee, in all those areas that have been suffering due to the collapsing industries of various kinds and the collapsing communities, okay, of various kinds, would have a renaissance. There'd be a tremendous flow of federal money into them under the Green New Deal, both jobs money, also money for housing, also money for high-speed internet. Unfortunately, we have some ambulances and fire trucks and those things coming to our apartment house. So there's some more noise outside, which you might be hearing some. And Lana says, we could play violins for lonely kittens. Lana says, that poor guy makes me sad. Arvel says, same. And Travis Daigle says, oh, God. CDC coronavirus test kits were likely contaminated, the Federal Review confirms. And Joanne says, FJG should raise wages for all current workers so corporations can retain good workers. Evelina says he was autistic. Criminal what they did to him. They. Spot on, Pavlina. The entitled neoliberals are the oppressors. Evelina says they. Avril says curse the person that reported him. Evelina says once they get onto this book, they'll start on the fact that Pavlina is Russian. Just wait. She's not Russian. If I recall correctly, Pavlina is Bulgarian and not Russian. The stupid people who are not so stupid, okay, but rather clever. Evelina says, very clever. Avril says, yes, McCarthyism is vitriol from hell in the United States. Unfortunately, boomers still spread it the most. Lana says, yes, I've defended her a time or two. She is from Bulgaria. Yes. Avril says, firms don't want workers. They want slaves. And that's quite true. Steve says, Russiagate is a political ideology, not a demographic. It isn't sufficiently broad to be an ideology. It's an aspect of an ideology, though. It's funny, the neoliberals seem to embrace it. Lana from the former Soviet bloc. Thanks for her place of birth. However, Bulgaria is no longer in the Soviet bloc. Hasn't been for a long time. Evelina says, Lana Del, good for you. I bet you have, Lana. Evelina says, I agree, but it's so widespread. It covers all demographics, laugh out loud, at least in the States, and from there, Canada, Europe, and Latin America even. Such BS. Evelina says, tends to cover. Does Mr. C. Booker know macroeconomics, specifically MMT? Well, you have to specify further because Mr. Cory Booker, who's also a C. Booker, I don't think he knows much MMT. But Charlie Booker may have had some exposure already. I don't know for certain if he has, but he talks like he would pick it what has to be picked up within an hour. Within an hour. I could get it to him within 1 hour. Okay, Lana says, okay, another thing the FJG would reduce is military enlistment. Would be better coupled with free college, of course. Well, it is going to be coupled with free college under the Sanders agenda. Stacy says, Cory Booker is like a black Chris Christie. Not sure about Charles. Charles looks like a Green New Dealer, Medicare for all person. Evelina says, Charles is open, I would guess. Avro said, I didn't mean Booker, the big pharma hooker. Yes, in fact, I mostly, in my lighter moments, refer to him as Cory Hooker. Evelina Ponce said, he's decadent, laugh out loud. Lana says, I think Fadl Kaboub has spent some time with Charles Booker. Yes, I think so too. Stephanie says, my iPad is getting hot. It's on the charger while watching. I'm going to have to get off here for a while. If I don't get back on in time, good night, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow night if the rain doesn't give me a migraine. Geez, I hope it doesn't. And tomorrow night, again, is going to be Q&A, both for the deficit myth and the case for the job guarantee. Stephanie says, thank you, Dr. Joe. Good night. And thank you, Stephanie. Evelina says, night, sweetie. And Kay says, night, Steph. Deborah says, if only we could have all this. We need a miracle to have it. We don't need a miracle. We all need to fight. We all need to push. We all need to work. It's not even a question of whether we're going to get it. We're going to get it. The question is whether we're going to get it in time to really block the damage from the climate emergency. Yes, honey.
4 ambulances, a fire truck, and police out there.
Oh, my God.
They're not walking around like there's any big problem, but
Oh, my God.
I just thought I'd let you know.
There are 4 ambulances outside?
Uh-huh.
God, I wonder what the heck's going on. Hola, amiga. There are fire trucks.
One big fire truck, and that's over there. The ambulances are.
Is the fire truck a hook and ladder?
Yeah.
Oh, gee. Wonder what's going on here tonight.
They can't leave because of the things that they're.
I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. Deborah Wilson says, hola. Kay says, we need elected officials who actually work for we the people, Deborah. We'll get them. The question is how long. Avril says, unfortunately, COVID may force the progressive platform into the forefront. Avril says, meaning it's unfortunate that it takes a pandemic for the Fed government to consider progressive policies. They're still not considering it. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's a freaking scandal. I don't know how they can vote for her in her district this year at all. I mean, if they do, it'll be a case of what the hell are they thinking? I mean, she's been terrible, terrible. And Deborah says, K. Clark Ryan, don't I know it? It seems hopeless sometimes, but maybe good things will happen this year after all. Some good things have already happened. Now we got to focus on getting rid of Nancy Pelosi, helping Shahed Buttar. Very important. We need to get him in there. We need to get her out of there. Katie Johnstone, both of America's far right political parties using different tactics to accuse one another of being far left. Meanwhile, there's not a bee's dick of difference between the two. Well, Joanne says, I would say it is fortunate that COVID-19 woke the people up. FJG has been needed for decades to eliminate poverty and homelessness. I think the FJG is now really coming to the fore because of the economic effects of COVID-19. And of course, the more people do not do anything about it in this silly, stupid government, the more popular the FJG is going to be, and the more unpopular these people are going to be. Steve Wolfbrand says, I love Katie Johnstone. I do too. And Evelina Pont says, bee's dick. I suppose they have one, though I never pondered on it. Stephanie says, the iPad is cooling off. Hopefully I can finish out the stream. Great. And Steve Wolfbrand says, Dee's dick might be an Australian thing. Steve says, have you pondered bee's knees, quote unquote, says Steve Gonzo, laugh out loud. And Stephanie says, Evelina Pont, thank you. Sandy Degg says it's a very hot topic. Pounded. Avril says that was Stephanie's vision as well. Yes. And Joanne says, okay, Medicare for all should be rolled out now for people losing their insurance due to COVID-19 and all uninsured. Should be, but is not being. Evelina says, Steve, STEEV, Australian. So hence the special stroke of something just short of genius. I'm impressed. Kay says, so many educated people just that don't believe either. Oops. I just scrolled too fast, folks. I'm trying to get back to where I was. Okay, here we go. I'm back to where I was. Steve says there's 20 progressives demanding Pegosi bring it to the floor. Yes, I know. Evelina says totalitarianism in the workplace. That's quite right. Steve Wolfbrand says they keep our medical coverage tied to our jobs to keep us enslaved to capitalism. Yes, Steve, that's correct. Avril says Rocco is ahead of his time. He's been ahead of his time for years now. Stephanie says a lot of helpful information and comments tonight. Thank you. And Steve says he's worth $1 million. Okay, Lana says, Steve, okay, is Rocco a man? He certainly is. Joanne Ricardio says, if she doesn't, she must be voted out. Avril says, that was from Forbes. Sorry, didn't mean to post that piece. That's all right. Steve says, I think so, a very rich one, but I don't know him personally. No, Rocco is not a very rich man, but he is a man. He is a man. Rocco is a very hardworking, a young man who is a single father, has a child to take care of, and is a really good dad. And his son is adorable. Avril says, laugh out loud. No, Rocco isn't all that rich except in spirit. Romano says, right, a very articulate vet. He is. Lana says, poor Rocco, are you still here? We're giving you poop, haha. Steve asks, wasn't he on the Flintstones? And Deborah Wilson and rich in knowledge, not to forget. Avril says, a poop, a laugh out loud, never heard that expression before. Steve says, should be included in a guaranteed job program. Let's all work together. Good, Joanne. Steve says, undocumented should be included in the guaranteed job program. Let's all work together. Yeah, the undocumented would be included in the guaranteed job program. You bet. Kay says, Ohio needs it too badly. And Joanne says, rain in Tucson for the first time in months, hoping it is raining over the fires. Me too. Kay says, good, Joanne. Hope it hits the fire too. Avril Mano. I'm trying to be nice, says Lana Dell. Steve says, if you're not familiar with Caitlin Johnstone, look her up. She is fabulous. She is. Avril says, under the FJG, the Fed government would have to curb all those restrictive rules, laws, and legislation that they've been letting corporations and especially the neoliberals get away with. Stephanie says, good night, my friends. Good live stream tonight. Thank you, everyone, for all the information. I learned much tonight for sure. I understand the FJG better now. You should. You should understand it better because that was really a clear exposition by Pavlina. And I'm sure I added a few thoughts to that as well. Joanne says, temperature dropped from 93 to 70 in minutes. Steve Wolfbrand says, good night. Stephanie. And also Dolores says, good night, Stephanie. And Barney is walking in back of me right now. Wanted to get to the window. Steve says they mandated masks in Ohio today. That's great. Steve says question and answer is good. Deborah says, I hope so, Joe, that we get it. Kay says, thank you all for another great discussion. Always love these discussions. And Avril asked if there was a gas leak or a suicide attempt. I sure hope not. I mean, this place is usually
5 ambulances, not 4.
There are 5 ambulances outside. I have no idea what is going on here. There are never so many. Well, we have a lot of ambulances that come here because people are older and they have some problems, and people have the ability to call ambulances quickly, and they don't waste any time, in calling them. But we have never seen so many ambulances out front, at once, which means so many people in trouble at once in this particular building. It's very strange that 4 or 5 of them would have a problem at once. That's very strange and very alarming. And Kay says, Shahid Buttar for Congress had a great live stream on Facebook this evening. I sure hope he wins. Me too. And Avril says, I'm getting a really bad migraine too. Is a tropical storm out in the water? Hurricane Godzilla? Kay says, even Biden is not running on Medicare for all. How stupid is he? He's stubborn. He's stubborn. He's both stupid and stubborn. I mean, he would easily get millions more votes if he were running on Medicare for all. I mean, the people who don't want Medicare for all have nowhere else to go except to Biden anyway. In other words, they're not in favor of Biden right now because he's not for Medicare for all. And they're not going to leave him if he comes out for Medicare for all. All he can do if he comes out for Medicare for all is, he'll lose some donor money. There's no question about that. But he's going to gain millions of votes in return. Joanne says, Barack O'Million is a great guy, and his son is an adorable mini-me. He is. Alvaro says, let us know what's going on, Bonnie. Sandy says, hi, Bonnie. Steve says, 4 ambulances, nothing. I live in downtown LA. Hey, we have a very small development here. Helicopters and explosions all night. It's a war zone. Caravans of cops and black SUVs. Where'd they get all those black SUVs? Probably from General Motors or Ford, right? Deborah says, good night, gang. Good night, Deborah. Steve says, eat something. Could be blood sugar. And Kay says, that low-income apartment building I lived in had ambulances a lot. Yeah, we have ambulances a lot too, but not like we're having right now, right outside. Alvaro says, no, I ate well, thanks for your concern. And Joanne says, life in LA, I lived in Canoga Park for years, helicopter lights every night. My daughter doesn't talk too much about that. She lives in LA now. She seems to be staying home a lot. She's not taking chances, which makes us feel good because we don't want her to take chances at all. Okay, folks, I've come to the end. So once again, tomorrow night, a Q&A on the 2 books on the deficit myth and the case for the job guarantee on Stephanie Kelton's book and Pavlina Tcherneva's book. Okay, both great books. I'll answer any questions about them. I'm pretty sure I can answer any questions about them that you might have. And so it's going to be open season on me tomorrow. So have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.